Welcome to the Self Within podcast, where we will look to ancient traditions and modern insights to seek guidance, knowledge, and practical tools to help us reconnect with our true selves. Join me, your host, as we explore various topics from mindfulness and meditation to energy healing, astrology, and much more. We'll hear from experts and everyday individuals to explore the connections that exist between mind, body, and spirit, and how we can use them for personal growth. Welcome to another episode of The Self Within. And so, as a part of Mental Health Awareness Month this May, I wanted to talk about a topic that is deeply personal to me, and that is maternal mental health, especially the postpartum experience for women, which I think can often be overlooked and misunderstood. I know that when I had my first daughter, I remember just feeling off. And of course, there were a mix of emotions that went along with that at the time, I really didn't know how to describe, because there was a part of me that was happy. Of course, I got to meet my child. I had been waiting for 9 months, that I wasn't pregnant anymore, and that I could begin to also eat foods that I had completely abstained from during pregnancy. And as a new mom, I remember that those first few weeks and months were tough. And I think a lot of it really came from expectations of how to feel, how to act, what to do. I felt a lot of pressure. And I think some of it I was putting on myself. Some of it was coming from others, like family members, or even what I was seeing on TV or what I was reading. I also remember feeling lost, because all of a sudden, the person who I was, or I knew for the past 20 some odd years, felt different. There were new responsibilities. There were new sensations physically, mentally, emotionally. And not to mention, all of a sudden, my needs had to come second, or maybe third or fourth on the list. I think this brought about feelings of guilt, shame, and overwhelm. So if you're a mom having any of these feelings, I want to tell you that I completely see you, I feel you, and I've been there. Today, joining me to unpack this topic is Kathleen Stern, who is a certified birth and postpartum doula from Boston Area Doulas. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great topic that I think we need to talk about more, just to let everyone know that they're not alone.
Yes, totally. And I remember as I was looking through your website, I remember coming across this quote that you have, which is to reach out for help before you think you need it. You're not supposed to be able to do this by yourself. When I read that, it was just so powerful. And that's the thing I want to start out with, which is, what are some of the stigmas that might be stopping parents from getting help from your experience?
Yeah, it happens a lot. I think we feel like parenthood is this rite of passage that needs to be endured or survived. I think a lot of folks who are working professionals or have worked hard in their lives celebrate the busyness, celebrate the multitasking, and parenthood becomes one of those other elements, whereas that grind shouldn't be the thing we want in parenthood. Sacrificing sort of your body and your mental health as a new parent, that's not the goal. I feel like this idea that permeates is if I can't figure it out, I'm weak, or if I need help, or if I contact a doula, I'm sort of being self-indulgent. And that is not at all the case. Parenthood doesn't need to be something that you need to get through and survive. It shouldn't feel that way. But I feel like this idea permeates our culture. I think more broadly in the US, there's this idea that postpartum is a finite period. It is 6 weeks. You are at that time ready to return to all activities. This will pass. There's the bounce back culture that we see in the media with famous folks looking a certain way after they have had a baby. And, folks don't feel like themselves after that time period, it's like, okay, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I feel that way? Why can't I go back to the way I was before? There's this Dutch word for recovering from pregnancy, and it does not exist in English. I can't pronounce it. I'm not going to try, but it is a word that means to be unpregnant. And it acknowledges the fact that it takes like 9 to 10 months to grow a baby, birth a baby, and it takes 9 months after at least to recover from having a baby. So there's this idea out there that it at least takes 9 months to recover, but we don't have that time. We don't have that understanding in the US. And I think folks and parents feel pressure to get things back to quote unquote normal in a short period of time. I also think within families, sometimes there can be individual patterns where we don't talk about emotions, or I don't talk about negative feelings that I have. And that can prevent parents from reaching out to getting help. And I think in a more acute way, if a parent is really struggling and they're having either increased anxiety, having trouble getting out of bed, having intrusive thoughts, there's this concern that I'm going to be viewed as a bad parent. Even the concern, like I'm going to have my baby taken away from me if I really share with my provider how I'm feeling.
Right.
There's that real concern and fear. Like, why can't I be the parent in the diaper commercials, like laughing and kissing their baby's hands and neck, and it's not all rainbows and sunshine.
So there's a bit of that comparisonitis, right? Where I think it's a natural human thing to do, right? Where we see ourselves, we see others, and it's like, why can't I just fill in the blank? And I love what you said about so many things, but just the fact that broadly in the US, there is this story that we continue to live out, or we continue to tell ourselves, which is there is this need for speed, right? This need to get back to things as they were. But when I think about my parents, and both of them are not originally from the US, and I think about their cultures, which are so family driven, and I grew up with grandparents and aunts and uncles, and having that, I think, in some way, whether it's not physical support, you're also getting it mentally and emotionally. And so if I think back to many years ago, or even in different cultures, I think children were raised by communities and villages and groups of people and groups of mothers. And we're so far removed from that we're not even giving ourselves enough time to actually recover from the experience of the 9 months that we just had, right? We're looking for that really quick fix, the quick solution, like, how do I get back to work? I actually used to work at a German company, and I remember our European colleagues would have a year or more, both mother and father, to spend time with their newborn. And I think in the US, we always saw that as such an amazing opportunity to have, but one that we didn't really get just because of how things are structured here, which are a little bit different.
Right. It's like, where are we choosing to invest? Are we choosing to invest in parents who've just had a baby at the most critical time in their lives? And what is the payoff there? I think right now in the US, we're not seeing that, but it's so valuable. You know, you spoke to your parents' experience and that idea of being raised by an extended family, to have the aunt or the grandma or the uncle who lives next door, and you can have them come over. And that doesn't exist for a lot of folks. Like who we hear from, it's either my parents live in a different country, different state, or they're older and they can't really help take care of my baby. And so I need to create this village around me, and it's hard to do. And you have to pay for it. You know, it's like this whole other thing. We're not at the moment comprehensively covering doulas with insurance, especially with private insurance. I hope that changes in the next few years, but not at the moment.
And just to touch on this for a little bit, for those that may not know specifically what a doula does, can you just shed some light on that?
Yeah. So a doula is really a neutral third party, a great alternative to Google, but we're here to help parents adjust by making sure that they are getting their basic needs met as new parents. Are they eating? Are they sleeping? Are they able to shower when they want to shower? We're also there to support the baby in their transition. Is that baby doing okay, feeding, digesting, being soothed, sleeping? And then we're there to manage anything that gets in the way of either of those transitions. So if a parent is having trouble sleeping, even if they're given the chance, we can help manage that. If a baby is struggling with reflux or colic, we can help troubleshoot that. So we're a great point person to offer for this physical, emotional, and informational support. And we're not medical professionals, but when we notice something is outside the range of normal, either for physical recovery for a parent, mental health, or something related to the baby, we can recommend an expert, like talking to their pediatrician or seeing a pelvic floor therapist.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that goes exactly back to that quote that I started out with, which is really, you don't have to go at this alone. And I think it is important that in some way, finding something that works and fits for you that will meet those needs, whatever they are, knowing that you have support. Now, I know that postpartum can have lots of different physical and emotional changes that are happening. Some of them might be familiar, some of them are completely brand new and unexpected. And I know that at least in the first few weeks after having your baby, there can be mood swings. And that's pretty normal. From what I was reading online, about 60 to 80% of mothers will experience what I think many of us have heard as the baby blues.
Mm-hmm.
That said, there is also approximately between 10 and 20% of women whose symptoms don't really go away or they don't improve. And so, how can mothers really differentiate between normal postpartum adjustments to more serious concerns where they might need to do something else about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. So the baby blues, this normal, typical experience that happens after having a baby, can be characterized by either crying, it could be feeling weepy. It's usually occurring in the first few days to 2 weeks after you've had a baby. It usually peaks around day 3 or 4 or 5, but it's not persistent. It's not that you're crying all day, every day of the week. You're not feeling weepy all the time. It can come and go. And there's a lot of reasons related to the baby blues. The big hormonal shift, progesterone has just dropped in your body. There's also sleep deprivation that's happening. So that usually resolves by the second week. If you're noticing into that third week of postpartum that you're continuing to feel weepy, sad, you're having trouble functioning, you're having trouble sleeping, you're having trouble getting out of bed, waking up, if this is persisting throughout most of the day and it's happening most days of the week, that is a sign that it could be something more. It could be perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And there's a few of those. This category is called PMADS, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So just broadly, we don't have to get into the details of each one, but if you're having trouble functioning, you're not feeling like yourself, like you don't have an appetite, you feel like your mind is racing, you can't really turn it off, even if you're given a chance to sleep, you just can't, you feel like you can't leave your house. Even if you're having physical symptoms like headaches, backaches, nausea, brain fog, those are things to look at. This might be a sign that this is something more, and this needs some more support to be resolved, because perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, while they're treatable, they do not go away on their own, and they can persist for weeks, months, into the first year postpartum.
Now, can it extend past the first year or if it continues to go untreated? And I ask that because as a Reiki practitioner, I also know that with emotions, a lot of times when we go back to our day to day, we go back to our routine, it's so easy to push the emotions aside. Because to be honest, they're hard. They're hard to deal with. Like when you allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, whether it's sadness or whatever else, you're in it. And it can be hard to get out, and you have to allow that process to happen to get it out of your system. And because that takes time. And most of us don't have the time because we're running from the one thing to the next. We just allow life to happen and we move on with life.
Mhm.
And that's when I often find that these stuffed up emotions, they don't really go away and they continue to stay there. And I think as things accumulate, other stuff pops up for us.
Mhm.
And so I'm interested to hear from you, like what happens if it goes untreated past that year or even longer?
Mhm. Yeah, well, it certainly can. These perinatal mood and anxiety disorders can continue well beyond a year. And like you mentioned, especially if we're not really thinking about how we're feeling, acknowledging it, and just sort of pushing forward. Things that can persist and that can show up could be postpartum anxiety, could be postpartum depression, postpartum OCD, which is really having intrusive thoughts or images like you're carrying your baby down the stairs and you fall. That is not real, but it is an image that keeps happening, that you keep seeing. Even postpartum PTSD from a traumatic birth or postpartum experience can include panic attacks. It can include flashbacks or nightmares, those intrusive and vivid thoughts that I just referenced. And more rarely, but possibly postpartum psychosis, delusions, irrational thinking, extreme paranoia. And if they're not treated, they can, I think it goes without saying, but it can deeply, deeply impact you and your family, physically, emotionally. It can make it hard to function if you're going back to a job, paid work. It can really affect all aspects of your life. And right now, the way that most medical providers are assessing for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders postpartum, it happens at a 6-week postpartum checkup. And it's a 10 questionnaire. It's called the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale. And it's statements, and you have to agree or disagree. I have felt anxious or worried for no good reason. And the parent says yes, or sometimes, or no, not at all. It's given one time at a 6-week checkup, right? And the visit is really brief. If parents don't feel comfortable being honest because of some of the stigmas we talked
Exactly.
about,
Yes.
that it sort of defeats the purpose of that assessment. But if they are being honest and they share, yes, I am feeling a lot of these things, a provider may not always act on that or say, oh, everyone feels that way. You have a new baby. It'll get better. So there's really not this comprehensive follow-up to assessing, but also supporting a parent's mental health along the way at various checkpoints in that first year and beyond.
I think that brings me to my next question because I know how difficult it can be to speak up about what you're feeling based on what we just talked about. You might feel judged or you feel guilty, right? You feel these feelings that are just, they're not good. And I think as a mom or as a parent, you don't want to feel them about your kid. You don't want to have these thoughts. And it does make you feel like you're just a terrible person overall. So, what words of encouragement or advice would you have for either moms or even for family
Mhm.
members who can help? And I'll talk a little bit about my situation because I had postpartum depression with both my kids. And my second daughter, I had her at the beginning of COVID. So talk about full isolation. I mean, I remember thinking and envisioning my post pregnancy as this wonderful time where I would be going out for walks and be meeting up with friends and grabbing coffee. And I was like, this can be so great. And the complete opposite happened. And we couldn't have family. And my parents lived close by. And it was so hard. And I think that was probably the hardest time when I had the postpartum. But in a way, I didn't even know what was going on because the whole world was upside down. So I thought, well, everyone's dealing with this. Why is my case special? Why am I different from everyone else who's also either in worse situations, right? I would kind of put myself there. I'm grateful for my partner because he was the one that said, look, I think there's something else going on here. And I would encourage you to get some support or speak to someone about it. And that was the little like click that, oh, okay, someone else is noticing it. It's not just me. So,
Mhm.
how can family members or friends maybe educate themselves better? Like, what are the things to look out for?
Yeah, that's great. And I'm so glad that your partner was able to reflect back and say, hey, you are struggling. Let's try to make this better, because that's a key moment to just narrate, hey, I'm seeing this. I want you to feel better. Let's try to fix this. For friends and family, I think I'll back up and first just say to the parents who might be struggling to either share how they're feeling. I want you to know that you're not alone, that 1 in 5 women, 1 in 10 men experience postpartum depression or anxiety, and sometimes during pregnancy for people who are pregnant. And so to be patient with yourself, to give yourself grace. And as you mentioned in the beginning, a quote that I share is that you're not supposed to be able to do this on your own, to raise a baby by yourself, to recover from giving birth. So I think that friends and family can first understand what perinatal mood and anxieties look like and know some of the risk factors. And there's a great website and resource called Postpartum Support International. The website is postpartum.net. And there is a great one-pager on symptoms, and you can print it out. You can put it on your fridge. I really encourage all new parents to put that out there. And as a reminder to the grandparents who are visiting or the partners to say, hey, how is this person doing? I think another way to familiarize yourself with what some of these anxiety and mood disorders look like, there's a great book called Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts. And it's these wonderful illustrations with thought bubbles about what someone is saying. Yeah, I'm fine. It's going great. And then what they're really thinking. It really hits the nail on the head. So I think for friends and family, if you're visiting someone who's just had a baby, really ask them the honest questions like, what's the hardest part of your day? Or what's been really challenging right now? Avoid those general questions like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Because we want to people please, and that person's going to say, oh, I'm fine. I'm a little tired, but I'll get through it. But to really pinpoint and say, what's the hardest part of your day? I think instead of asking things like, how are you sleeping? Because again, it's good, okay, bad, to ask things like, how long does it take you to fall asleep? Does your sleep feel restless? Do you wake up often? And you don't need to be a mental health professional to ask these questions of a loved one or someone you care for. Right. But to really just open the door and signal to that person that you are a safe space for them, that you are not going to be judging them, and that you are tuning into how they're feeling. And I think specific concrete ways that loved ones can help, there's a really important resource to know about. So in addition to Postpartum Support International, the number 988 that you can call or you can text is a great resource for mental health crises. So there is always a live person on the other end of that via text or call if you sense that someone is really struggling and needs immediate help. And I think to improve how folks are feeling, offering specific things like, hey, I'm going to hold the baby so you can sleep. Getting 4 uninterrupted hours of sleep is a game changer. It's not going to resolve all the issues, but it can make a significant impact that day and maybe the next day, and help that parent see through the fog. So if you are a friend or family who can make that happen, let's go for it. Sleep is a huge trigger, and sleep deprivation, a huge trigger for a lot of these disorders. Or offering to take a walk with a parent who's struggling with their baby, or letting the parent take a walk by themselves so you can watch the baby and they don't need to worry about the logistics of getting out the door with a stroller and feeding them and all of that. And even family members helping search for and set up a time with a therapist, doing the Google search for someone if they permit that, reaching out. All of those things that seem small can be really exhausting to a parent with a new baby. So if you can really take that cognitive load off of someone's shoulders and say, hey, do you want me to find the name of 1 or 2 people, therapists who don't have a wait list, who take your insurance? Great. That's a huge, huge way to educate yourself, but also to immediately offer some compassionate support.
Those are some great tips. I mean, I didn't even know about half of those, and I feel like I would have totally used them at the time.
I know it's things I wish I knew, and I wish people had asked me too, right? So
yeah,
we learn, we live.
And it's true though, those little like question nuances where it's so easy to ask, how are you doing? It's the basic, it's like the weather, right? It's like the
Mhm.
basic question you get. And you're right. Often it's just like, okay, everything's fine. But underneath it, there's something more. And I think the truth is we just don't know how to probe in the right way. And sometimes it's also like we don't want to go too deep if they don't want to. They would have shared if they had something to share. But sometimes you're feeling like, well, they're here to see the baby. Why am I going to burden them with my troubles and my worries? What are they really going to do? And I think
Yeah.
just knowing that you can create a safe space is enough that can allow for someone to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable and letting things out can also bring relief, if
Yeah.
anything.
Yes. And I think there's a family members might feel pressure to say the right thing, like you said, or ask the right probing question. And we don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
We just need to signal that, like you said, we are a safe space, we're a listening ear, and to just sit with that, help that person share a little bit of how they're feeling. Hopefully that lightens their load a little bit, and know that you can just sit next to someone and ask them how they're doing. And that's enough for right now.
Yeah,
That's
I love that. Now, I also know that aside from a lot of the emotions that we've talked about, another aspect of the postpartum experience that I think can sometimes be overlooked is the impact that this can have on a mother's sense of identity or maybe feeling unseen. So, how can mothers navigate this
mm-hmm.
and really try to rediscover themselves in the midst of motherhood? And even if you're a new mom or if you're a mom for a long time now, it's different, I think, every single time. And it is a journey because I found that for myself. It was a journey that took patience and figuring out what does the new version of me want? What do I like? It's not the same. Maybe it is. Maybe it's different. But it's tough. It's weird. And you don't know how to describe it. And I think a lot of times people want you to be back to the person you were. And you're like, but I don't know if I'm there anymore. So do I go back? It's like the best way I could describe it. It's just strange. It's a strange
Mm-hmm.
journey to go on. And
Mm-hmm.
once you've found it, and it's also a lifelong journey that you can allow yourself to be on, like giving yourself the permission and the grace to say, there's no time, there's no specific milestone. I need to go at my own pace and see what resonates with me in this newfound version of myself with my family, with my kids, and also what do I like to do alone, just as me.
Yes, exactly. That was one of the things I wanted to mention. I'm thinking of a quote. There's a phrase that there's no way to be a perfect mother and a million ways to be a good one. And so I think one is just in terms of helping you find your identity and yourself after motherhood, like knowing that there's not one right path. What should this even look like? There is no one right path. I think, secondly, mothers have an identity outside of being mothers. There are layers
Yeah.
to this person that, yes, you are a mother, and you are also a sister and a plant enthusiast and someone who maybe likes to get their nails done and likes to organize things or loves jazz and whatever that is, just to remember those things. So I think it can be helpful to, think of something that you used to like to do before kids or that you did before having a baby, and even write those down on a post-it. Some small things that don't cost money, things that don't take up a lot of time. It's like, I liked to sit outside and drink my coffee while looking at the sunrise. Hey, that's important to me. Or I liked to be in my car listening to music. Or I liked to cook. Or I like to move my body. I like to talk on the phone to a friend. All of those things that we forget that get harder to do when you have a newborn and then you have toddlers and kids, and it keeps happening. So make a mental or physical checklist of these are some of the things that gave me joy, that are part of who I am, that are important to me. And at some point, whenever that feels feasible, to try one of those things, to give yourself 20-15 minutes to do one of those. Don't feel like you have to do it every day of the week, but hey, one day this week, I'm going to call my friend, or I'm going to try to sit outside on the front steps and drink my coffee. That can really help folks feel like back in touch with who they are. I think that you don't have to feel guilty about pouring into yourself. I don't want people to think of like those activities as taking a break, quote unquote, from being a parent. There's never a break. Once you're a parent, you're always a parent. So this, going back to the stigmas we talked about, it doesn't mean that you're sacrificing being a good parent if you do one of these things. The only way you can pour into others and be a great person in relationship to others is if you are pouring into yourself. From a tactical level, I think it helps to have identified some folks in your life who can help you find the time to do the things that you like to do. So if you have a partner or a friend or a family member who can come over and hold your baby, or who can help out, maybe doesn't like to hold babies, but is great at doing the laundry and washing bottles and cooking, or who doesn't care if your house is a mess. Embrace those people in your life so that you have more time to focus on the things that make you really unique outside of being a parent.
I like this idea of not seeing it or maybe calling it as a break, but rather integrating it into what you already have going on, or integrating it into your routine. And I think oftentimes we talk a lot about this too, with like work-life balance, which means that at some point we have to draw a line. There's a separation. There's a very clear separation between one and the other. And to get from there, you have to stop to do the next thing. And I think, as you so rightly said, with parenthood, it really just continues. So rather than viewing it as I'm going to take a break, and I can also see that once that break ends, however long you give yourself, there could be this feeling of dread, like, oh, I have to go back to the thing that I don't like, or the thing that kind of causes the tension, or whatever it is. But if we can try to even create more of a habit with it, where it becomes a bit of a regular thing, like you said, doesn't have to be an hour. It can be 5 minutes to just give to yourself, and then making it a habit so it always happens, and it could be something you look forward to, and that is just a part of your life now, just like motherhood or parenthood is.
Right.
Then that can be a really nice thing, I think.
Yeah. And as kids get older, I think modeling that for them, that, hey, these are the ways that I recharge myself as a person. And that's going to be different for everybody. For kids to see, my kids are 7 and 10 now, and they know I need to go down the basement, do my little workout thing. And sometimes they'll come down and try to do stretches with me, or they know that on the weekends I might want to chill a little bit, relax. And sometimes they're like, hey, Mom, can we help you like play spa? And I say, fine, yeah, sure. But they know, oh, you're going to lay on your little acupressure mat, right? Can I do it? So it's fun. You can bring them into this, but they are learning that, hey, everyone needs something a little different. It's important to not ignore how you're feeling and what you need. And again, that's nothing to feel guilty about.
Yes. I love that. Yeah. My kids also join me when I'm doing my workouts, and they try to mimic certain moves and stuff. And I think it's funny, but
yeah. If only I had the energy of a 7-year-old, would be.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. So what final message would you like to share with moms and dads, right? Because it's not just something that happens to mothers. It can happen to fathers as well. And so anyone that might be going through the postpartum experience, anything that you might want to share as final parting words?
Yeah, I would say that any parent, whether you're a brand new parent or a third, fourth time parent, that we're not meant to do this on our own. And if you're feeling like you're struggling, you are not alone. And the last thing I'll say is that you are doing the best you can with the tools that you have.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your expertise. This is so helpful. And yeah, I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you're interested in becoming a client and working with me, visit me at nunatherapy.com, or follow me on social media at nunatherapy for regular content and inspiration. Until next time.